Hello out there. Happy Sunday, everyone. I was going to do a longer form version of this video, but it was such an unseasonably warm day in the Pittsburgh area, I figured I would try out a little live stream. And this live stream is going to be about the state of the 2020 Pittsburgh Steelers. Now, in order to talk about the state of the 2020 Pittsburgh Steelers, you have to, of course, talk about the 2019 Pittsburgh Steelers. And really, you have to talk about the 2018 Pittsburgh Steelers, which I did a video on the state of how that season ended. And in that video, it was right after the season was done, so I said a lot of stupid things, like things in hindsight don't make any sense. Like, for example, the Steelers are not going to trade Antonio Brown. That's the thing I said in a video that you can watch. I kept that video up. I didn't shy away from it. I said the Steelers weren't going to trade Antonio Brown. They traded Antonio Brown. So there is a lot of things that, with hindsight, I made some snap judgments on things. Turns out not to be true. But in this circumstance, we're here to talk about the current iteration of the Steelers. Now, the last season, when Brown, when they traded away Brown, that long off season, that horribly long off season, is in, that off season may have been the longest one in Steelers history because they criticized Ben, they criticized the Steelers for how they handled the Brown situation. All of it turned into a big mess, and obviously future will tell you that a lot of that was because of Antonio Brown. Now, this last season ended very similarly to the 2018 season. Steelers were heading into week 17. They needed help. They had a game that they lost that they could have won. For the 2018 campaign, it was the Saints game that should have been a win. The 2019 game, it was the Jets game. They should have won it, and they just tanked it. So they could have easily made those playoffs if they had beaten the Jets. It would have been a lot easier road. Fortunately, they lost that game. They ended up losing in week 17, but it doesn't matter because Tennessee won anyway. So it ended up being kind of a big mess. But the fact that they were even in playoff contention was a credit to my season. The Ben going down in week 2, the second half of week 2 on, the fact that they were still a playoff team come week 17, or at least a borderline playoff team, is kudos to Tomlin and how he handled things. Now, in regards to that, their quarterback play was not the greatest. The car alarm's going off. But their quarterback play wasn't the greatest. Rudolph proved that he wasn't really ready to handle the reins, and Duck Hodges showed some flashes, but I don't know if I would say that the quarterback position is stay secure for 2020. I wouldn't necessarily draft a quarterback myself, but I don't honestly think Hodges is going to have meaningful snaps moving forward. I'd be shocked if he plays another game for the Steelers. I think you learned a lot about Rudolph this past season, and it wasn't really that good. A mixed bag and there were different things that made Rudolph, I think, limited Rudolph. I think the hit that Earl Thomas gave to Rudolph, kind of made him a little bit gun shy. He was never really the same type of quarterback after that hit. I would say the incident, the Myles Garrett incident, which was another thing that was a whole debacle, that kind of, ruined his development moving forward, because he's now being accused of things that are trying to limit and end his career, when it wasn't something that was discussed during the incident. It only happened after the fact, when it seemed like a good excuse. But we learned a lot about what's really behind Ben, and unfortunately this team needs Ben if they want to be a Super Bowl contender, and I think they have the ability to be a Super Bowl contender, but there'll be a lot involved in that. There's going to be a lot of moves that have to be made in these next few days to turn this team into a legitimate Super Bowl contender, and I think they have the ability to do so, especially if Ben stays healthy. But there are concerns. Like, for example, the next thing comes up on March 13th is the franchise tag, and they have to decide whether they're going to put Bud on the franchise tag. And if you're basing it on a whole body of work, Bud Dupree is not worth the money, the top 5 money that a franchise tag is. I mean, it's the top 5 players in that league. So you're talking about players like Khalil Mack, the top of the line talent at the outside linebacker position. Bud isn't that. If you're basing it off of Bud's whole body of work, this past season, he was great. It was his only great season. The other season were underachieving, well underachieving. So it's definitely something where, the idea of a contract is you don't pay someone on their current contract, or you don't pay some on what they're going to, you pay someone on what they're going to do, not what they already did. So therefore, that would be a good thing for Bud. He has the ability to, maybe this is his step moving forward. Maybe Bud's going to be the guy. But as it stands now, not so much. Bud is not, Bud isn't, I wouldn't say Bud is of a top 5 or top 10 level. I would want to put probably the transition tag on him. The concern about not signing Bud and having Bud go out there is there's not really a ton in free agency out there for the Steelers. And sadly, there's not really a ton in the draft at the outside linebacker position. The other thing with that is you don't necessarily, when you draft a player, and I feel like there's bigger needs than outside linebacker. Even if Bud decides to leave, I think there's bigger needs. I wouldn't necessarily want to waste the 2nd round pick on a Bud replacement. So what has to be decided is whether or not the Steelers want to move forward with Bud Dupree. And if they decide they want to move forward with Bud Dupree, it's going to cost a lot of money. A lot of money they don't have. Steelers are cash strapped, unfortunately. They are 30th, I think, 31st in the league in cap space. They don't have a ton. So even if they decide to put the franchise tag on Bud, it's going to involve cutting some players, restructuring some contracts. Most onto it will have to be restructured. That'll save $7 million. And the concern, I guess, there's a lot of dead money involved when it comes to re-signing to it. Not re-signing to it, but like if you were to trade to it. Because as much as I love to it, he hasn't been on the field for a ton of games the last 2 seasons. Ever since he signed that big contract, he's probably played about 10 to 12 games combined. That's not necessarily going to do it, unfortunately, to the tune of $17 million dead cap space money if they trade him or if they cut him. So they can't do that, so they have to restructure him. As far as players to cut, I think Barron's as good as gone. I was high on Mark Barron. I really wanted Mark Barron to succeed. I really thought that was going to be a good signing as, say, a dimebacker type position. I thought he would excel there. Unfortunately, there was far too many plays where he was jogging into cover, say a dimebacker type position. I thought he would excel there. Unfortunately, there was far too many plays where he was jogging into coverage. You saw it in the San Francisco game. You saw it a couple times in pretty much every game of the season where somebody would throw a ball over the middle where Barron had coverage and he would jog his way to the person, where if he just took the extra step and attempted to run, he could have knocked the ball down, deflected it, maybe even made a couple picks there. It did not happen, unfortunately. And so I think Barron's the top cut. Chicolo would be another one. Not that I don't like Chicolo and think he's good with depth at the position, but unfortunately, Chicolo is just not worth $5 million a season, unfortunately. So I do think that is one that they are going to cut as well. I don't know if they're going to re-sign Mike Hilton, unfortunately. That's just going to come down to numbers. I think they feel like Cam Sutton could take his place. We'll see, whether that or not that goes down. As far as Bud, going back to Bud, I wouldn't mind if they put someone like a Tuzar Skipper or Ola as the starter and drafted someone in the later rounds to develop behind him. If it's something where you decide you want to get rid of Bud, which I don't think Bud is worth the money. Unfortunately, it's just based on the fact that, he had this one really good season, but is that enough? I don't think it's enough, unfortunately. I really don't. Now, when it comes down to players that they're going to cut, players they're going to, re-sign. There also comes down to them re-signing. They have to re-sign people like T.J. Watt, but what about Juju? Juju's due a contract in 2 years. So that is somebody, ideally, that they would like to sign in the offseason, but they really don't have any money to do so. I think that's part of the problem with the Steelers season, is they don't have a ton of money moving forward. So all this talk about them, drafting someone, they're going to trading for someone, they're going to trade for, Le'Veon Bell. The only way that would work, and there's only one way that could work, is if the Jets give a significant, and I do mean significant, pay a significant amount of that shipping cost. Because if they're paying, say, if he's due $13 million this season, I can't remember what the actual number is. Motorcycle. If he's due, say, I think it's $13 million this season, and they pay half of that, which, the Jets may be inclined to do, given the fact that they don't necessarily want him on the roster. I think that is something manageable that the Steelers can fit in under their cap. Unfortunately, with James Conner, you just don't know. You don't know with him. Kind of like Stephon Tuitt in that circumstance, where James Conner has not shown that he can carry the full 16-game load. He's not shown the ability so far to carry that load. Now, it's one of those things where it's like, oh, who needs Bell? Because when Connor's healthy and when Tuitt's healthy, it's like the problem is they haven't shown that they can be healthy. They haven't shown at one point that they can be healthy for a 16-game season, at least in the last few years, and for Connor, his entire career. So that is a concern there. If you're getting a top-flight talent, you want them to play the entire 16 games. And I don't think that's something that they can do. Hi, Chloe. I don't think that's something that they could do. Hello, what's going on here? Hi, you talking to the world? Say hi, world. Say hi, world. There she is. It's definitely something where you dancing. I'm putting on a show for everyone. It's definitely something that, there's rumors of them taking in the draft the running back from Ohio State. I think the Steelers brass is pretty high on Connor, and they like Samuels, and they like Benny Snell. Problem is if you bring in a Bell or you draft a running back, that one of those guys is going to have to go, and you have to decide which one of those guys it's going to be. So, beyond the issues with Bud, whether they signed him or not, beyond the issues with re-signing Hilton or BJ Finney, or there's a lot of players that they still have to sign that they don't really have the cap currently to sign. As far as them bringing in any outside free agents, they're not. We could send Bud on his merry way and pick up Jadeveon Clowney. It's not going to happen. Now, in that circumstance, every time that, say, the Steelers are flat broke, they don't have any money for anything, they always find a way to have money to do what they need to do. In that circumstance where a few years back when Dante Hightower was a free agent, they were cash strapped just like they always are, and yet they offered him more money than, say, the Jets, who had $100 million in cap space. The Steelers somehow offered more money. Obviously, he didn't take that deal. He went back to New England, but they found the way to find money to bring in this player that they coveted. I'm not saying that they can't do the same here, because I think they honestly can. So anytime they say, oh, the Steelers are broke, they don't have any money, they don't have any there's nobody that they can bring in. I defy that in the sense of that they could do it if they had the money and they had the need to. Unfortunately, based on this crop of free agents, I don't necessarily know that there's anybody outside of, say, a Clowney type or, another safety that is something that they can bring in. Wouldn't it be great if Edmonds had a proper, veteran safety presence behind him? Wouldn't it be better if Edmonds could almost take on the Mark Barron role? I don't necessarily know he's inclined for that, but I know that Edmonds' coverage was a liability last year, unfortunately, and it ended up causing, there was quite a few touchdowns that went right over his head because he didn't have the coverage for it. I would be interested to see if they brought in another safety, because their depth is lacking, and if somebody like Fitzpatrick or Edmonds gets hurt, unfortunately, the talent behind them is lacking severely. So it's definitely something where they want to bring in. They're going to want to bring in, I would say, either a drafted safety and a high drafted safety, like second or third round, and a veteran safety. I wouldn't mind seeing both, actually, given their circumstances, but given their cap room, they're not necessarily going to bring in top guys. Now, maybe you want to bring in somebody that's older, that has like a kind of veteran savvy, been around a long time. Same with that move. Very limited amount of money, which is what they're doing now. As far as wide receiver position, I'm fine with what they've done so far. I think John, who was throwing to him, nobody was really throwing to him. So people were talking and pointing at Emmanuel Sanders, saying be someone that they would bring in to, that would be like a veteran presence, and he has left it open that he wouldn't mind a return to Pittsburgh. Unfortunately, I don't think having a guy that you could, that just, like another small receiver. Although Sanders, still has good speed. He showed it in the Super Bowl a couple times. He shows the talent to catch the ball. It's not like he's like completely, dying and thinking he's something where, it would be an improvement. The problem is that we're running into that issue where they have a lot of guys that they like that are suddenly not going to be on this team anymore at the wide receiver position. They're going to have to make tough cuts if they bring in an outside person, but I do think they need to bring in an outside person. As far as, any other positions, I wouldn't mind having in their guard. Definitely, I don't think Ramon Foster is going to be returning to the team, unfortunately, unless it's a very... I think his days as a starter, let's say, are pretty much done. So Ramon Foster is, say, a backup. Would be someone that I wouldn't mind seeing as a backup person to, I don't know if that's a pride thing where he wouldn't necessarily want to, but, if the value's right, you bring him in on a backup deal as some value depth. But as far as him starting, I wouldn't have him be a starter again. I would not have Ramon Foster be a starter again on this team. So I do think they definitely need some depth because the line did take a step back last year. Whether you can say that was because of Munchak leaving or, you contributed to a lot of things. But unfortunately, the line was not the best. It was not their best performance. As far as, in the last few years, they definitely declined. I think getting another running back, getting a better line in there, or getting, better depth in the line, let's put it that way. Villanueva, I think there were some concerns. He's still good. I wouldn't necessarily replace Villanueva. Ramon Foster, I think, is probably done, barring him coming back for some needed depth. Pouncey, even having a Pro Bowl season, they voted him in the Pro Bowl, but even he took a step back last season. DeCastro is still one of the better guards in the league, so no worries there. And Filer, I think, isn't Filer in a contract here? I think he is. So I think, there's a concern there with wanting to re-up Filer and Finney just for some needed depth. But I think this might be the first year in a couple years where they're going to have to, draft some offensive players on the line, but we haven't got to the most glaring issue of all, and that's the tight end position. They need a tight end so bad. They need a tight end. I don't know if you bring back Vance, not at the money that he's currently slated to pull in, which I think is on 5.5, 6 million, something like that. I don't know if I'd bring back Vance at that for the same concerns that I have about Connor and the same concerns that I have about to it, and the same concerns that I even would say I'd have about Ben this time is that the fact is the dude can't stay healthy, unfortunately. I like what he does when he's on the field. The problem is he's on the field, and he was fairly healthy this last season, but because of the quarterback play, they virtually forgot about the tight end position. There were days where he could have no catches, no yards for a long period of time. There's times where they didn't look in him or Nick Vanette's direction. They traded for Vanette. I thought Vanette would be a good guy to have as far as depth, and they were right. They didn't use him. They didn't use him. They didn't use Vance. They didn't use the tight end position at all. I think if they had a tight end that was noteworthy, I'm not saying this guy, but let's say like an Evan Ingram type, somebody that was a bigger, not necessarily like a blocking tight end, but more of a receiving tight end, a mid-zone threat. I really think that would be crucial to this offense. I think that would take some limitations off of the short passing game to the running backs. Having a tight end there that would command attention. Hi, Chloe. Hello. Yeah, having a tight end that would command attention. I do think our top pick in this draft, I wouldn't mind them taking a tight end. Say, a mid to late round trade for an O.J. Howard or a David Njoku. I wouldn't mind that move either if they can work out the financials and they can work out a later round pick. O.J. Howard, especially the way it sounds like Tampa Bay is going to dangle him out for a mid to late round pick. Like if you're talking, 4th, 5th round pick for an O.J. Howard type, if you can get that contract under there, that's a guy you bring in. Now, free agency wise, I don't think they have a chance at any of the top free agents like an Austin Hooper. I think that would be a good addition. I don't think they're going to have the money to get him, unfortunately. They're not going to have the money to bring in, lower tier guys. So maybe the draft is the way to go unless you can work out a trade for, say, like an O.J. Howard type, which is against type for the Steelers, but then again, they did it several times in the last season. Maybe it's a sign of things to come. Colbert's going year to year. Tomlin even is going arguably year to year, and Ben has only a few years left. Maybe this is the time that the Steelers don't do the same old Steelers stuff, and they actually make some deals that they feel that they can make to bring in some interesting players to try to win another one. I would say, what are your thoughts on that? Is that something where you feel that the Steelers trade window is something that was just like a 1-year thing with them bringing in Fitzpatrick and Vanette, or do you think that they could honestly pull some trades moving forward to actually bring some players in to this team? The concerns are at running back, the concerns are at tight end, the concerns are at offensive line. If you lose Bud, the concerns are at outside linebacker. There's concern about, we didn't even get into the fact that there's concern about the defensive line position, because you're most likely losing Hargrave. Now, a lot of people are of an opinion that, Hargrave is going to get paid top dollar in this market. I wouldn't pay Hargrave top dollar. That's not saying that he's bad. I'm just saying the Steelers, he complements the Steelers very well, but I wouldn't necessarily also call him a game breaker by any circumstances either. He's not one of those people that was like, he's not like a, Ndamukong Suh or something in his prime or anything like that. I'd be okay with the Steelers drafting someone to replace him. Hargrave was a 3rd round guy, arguably the best player in that draft. I have a video that I took from Steelers Fan Blitz of the 2016 player introductions for the first, second, and third round. Our first round pick was Artie Burns, who is now gone. Our second round pick is Sean Davis, who is gone. Our third round pick is Hargrave, who is the best of the bunch. So, you know, the thing with Hargrave is that could someone get drafted in the third round, the end of the, and do what? You let me know if it's something you feel that it can't happen. Now, you know, should they decide to, you know, I think they're going to see what his market is out there. I don't think they're going to make an offer to him, and I wouldn't franchise tag him. You know, I definitely wouldn't franchise tag Hargrave. So he's going to find his way to the open market, and he's probably going to be gone, unfortunately. But so we went over, you know, who the Steelers are probably going to re-sign. You know, I'm kind of doing this on the fly. I'm just rattling stuff off the top of my head. So there could be people that abilities to, you know, maybe there's players that I think are under contract that aren't under contract. There's players that, you know, that I don't feel like they have to sign necessarily yet, that maybe it's crucial that they do sign them. I don't think it's unrealistic for the Steelers to make a trade for a veteran, you know, whether that's Bell or OJ Howard. I just don't. It'd be great if they did, but I don't think it's unrealistic. I just don't know about the possibilities. I don't think it's something where they can bring someone in, you know, with the money that they have, unfortunately, currently, because the money they have currently will require some moves just to get them cap compliant. And in that circumstance, they also have their own players to sign, whether they sign any of those players, which is, you know, if they don't sign any of those players or they sign one of, you know, a handful of guys, that's going to be some holes to fill. So let me know your thoughts. If you watch me ramble on here for 28 minutes or so live, because I didn't necessarily want to edit it. It was such a nice day outside, I wanted to do it. But do you feel that the Steelers are going to bring in are they going to make any trades for someone that's going to help their roster this year? Not necessarily in the draft day trades or anything like that, because I do think they are going to make a draft trade. I think they're going to trade down in a couple spots just to acquire additional draft capital. There may also be a circumstance where they're going to, you know, maybe someone for a additional pick, additional player. Whereas they you know, they trade a 4th or 5th round pick or something for a player during draft weekend. I wouldn't be shocked by that either, but especially if it's someone where they're trying to get money off the books before post June 1. But let me know your thoughts if you watched this far, and you know. I mean, like I said, it's just me rambling on about the Steelers' concerns, their needs, something like that moving forward. Do they feel that it is do you feel good about the Steelers, I guess would be the way to put it. Do you feel good about the Steelers heading into this season? Leave a comment. Let me know. Also, let me know your thoughts on the Steelers appearing on Hard Knocks. The Steelers most likely are going to appear on Hard Knocks. You can decide whether you think that's a good idea or a bad idea. And I would have concerns about myself whether it was a good idea or bad idea, but I mean, wouldn't it would be appointment television. I mean, must-see TV for any Steeler fan like myself to see the inner workings of how that ship's run under Tomlin. I wouldn't mind seeing it. I'd love to see it, but I would be concerned because generally the teams on Hard Knocks tank hard, you know, whether that's a distraction of the cameras or what that's like. But let me know your thoughts. Do you feel the Steelers should be on Hard Knocks? If you watched this far, thank you for watching me ramble on for 30 minutes on a Sunday, just rattling on about the Steelers. Leave a comment. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye, guys.